This was not a time of life. It was a kingdom of ice, a battlefield drawn across continents by a frozen hand. The air itself was a weapon, sharp and unforgiving, carving valleys and sharpening the fangs of a world at war.
In this land of monsters, to be born was to be thrust into a conflict
that had no beginning and no truce. It was an age of giants, a brutal epoch, where the throne of existence was claimed not by right, but by a philosophy of violence.
Here, survival was a daily conquest, a visceral, bloody struggle for the right to see the next sunrise.
The earth was a graveyard and a fortress, holding the bones of dynasties that had failed and the ambitions of those who would rise. The wind did not whisper. It roared the names of the fallen. The snow was not a blanket of peace, but a shroud, hiding the insurgent and the assassin, the tyrant and the titan. Every creature was a contender, every philosophy tested in the crucible of absolute necessity. Power was the only law, and that power was measured in the force of the kill. The strength of the herd, or the terrible, patient cunning of the lone hunter. This brutal hierarchy was the only truth.
And to rule was to be the greatest monster of all.
Now, let the chronicle of this lost ruler begin. Into this frozen crucible, a new ruler emerged.
It was not a tyrant of size, nor a conqueror of speed.
This was a presence defined by shadow and patience. This was Smilodon, the assassin. Its dominion was not declared, with a roar that shook the mountains, but with the chilling silence that preceded a strike.
It was a specialist, a master artisan of the kill, in an age of brutalist power.
Its entire philosophy was etched into its form, a creed written in muscle and bone,
culminating in the two terrible daggers that gave it its name.
These were not teeth. They were a declaration of intent. Long, curved, and honed to a terrifying edge. They were the specialized tools of a very specific, dark trade.
Unlike the crushing jaws of the tyrant bear or the tearing bite of the dire wolf pack,
The Saber-toothed's weapons were not for brawling.
They were for execution.
They were designed for one purpose: to find the artery, to sever the vessel of life, to end the struggle with a single, devastating, and intimate act of violence.
This philosophy of the fatal strike dictated its entire existence. The assassin was not built to chase down its prey over miles of open tundra.
Its dynasty was not founded on endurance.
It was founded on the ambush.
It was a powerhouse of terrible, explosive force, a specialist in the art of the grapple.
Its body was a marvel of condensed power. With massive, thickly muscled forelimbs, not for running, but for seizing.
They were anchors, iron-clad vices designed to hold a struggling, panicked world still.
Pinning down destiny itself.
Its kingdom was the line of trees, the shadow of the ravine.
The tall grasses that masked its patient approach. It was a ruler of the unseen. The Smilodon was not a predator. It was a ghost. A sudden, inexplicable force that erupted from the landscape. The stalk could last for hours, a masterclass in tension and control. Every step was measured, every breath held. This was the assassin's ritual, the long, cold patience, followed by the explosion of the charge, a few desperate bounds. And then the embrace. This was its creed. To wait, to watch.
To choose the perfect moment, and to commit absolutely.
It did not hunt, it judged. It selected its target, and in that selection, it passed a sentence. Its power was not in its size, but in its specialization. But in a land of monsters, specialization is a gamble. It is a philosophy that thrives on consistency, on a world that follows the rules the weapon was designed for. The assassin's creed was perfect. But the world was changing, and it held other powers. Powers that did not bleed so easily. But the philosophy of the assassin, for all its deadly perfection, was not the only power in this kingdom. There were older dominions.
There were rulers who did not need the shadows, for they cast the shadows.
A new dynasty moved across the frozen plawns. This was not a contender. It was an event. A force of nature given form. The earth did not just tremble at its approach. The ground surrendered. This was the era of the mammoth.
If the Smilodon was an assassin's dagger, the mammoth was the fortress wall.
It was a walking mountain, a titan whose very existence was a challenge to the creed of the fatal strike. Its philosophy was not cunning. It was scale. It was a dynasty built on the simple, undeniable truth of invulnerability. This was a creature that did not fear the ambush. For what could hide from a being that saw over the horizon? Its hide was not mere skin. It was a bulwark. A thick, layered defense, worn like royal armor, insulating it from the world's frozen wrath. And the desperate claws of lesser beings.
Its immense size was not a biological trait. It was a political statement.
It declared, simply by moving, that the rules of the hunt did not apply to it. Its dominion was absolute, its presence a gravitational force that bent the landscape around it. The great tusks were not just weapons, they were ramparts. Sweeping arcs of ivory that cleared the world before it.
Tossing aside challengers, wolf, lion, or bear, like trivial frustrations.
The sound of its herd was the sound of geology in motion. To the Smilodon, this walking mountain was a living contradiction. The assassin's entire arsenal, honed over millennia,
was rendered questionable by this single, lumbering truth.
The Smilodon's strength was in the grapple, in pinning its victim to the earth. But how does one pin a mountain? Its daggers were designed to find the warm, soft vulnerabilities of the throat.
The artery pulsing just beneath the hide.
But where was the vulnerability on a creature whose neck was a pillar of muscle? Thicker than the Smilodon's own body? This was the great rivalry. Not one of active, daily conflict, but a fundamental clash of power. The Mammoth dynasty represented an ancient, unassailable order. The Smilodon, for all its deadly specialization, was an insurgent.
A specialist whose weapons were designed for a different kind of war.
The mammoth was the impossible target. To attack, it was not hunting. It was madness. It was an act of hubris, a challenge to the very structure of their world. The assassin's daggers, so perfect for the flesh of a bison, were a terrible risk here. To strike this titan was to gamble with the only weapons the Smilodon possessed. A thrust against that thick hide, a graze against a colossal rib. And the delicate, blade-like sabers could shatter. The core of the assassin's philosophy, its very identity, could be broken against this unyielding wall. The mammoth was a fortress that did not need to fight back. It simply was.
And in this land of monsters, its mere existence was a constant, silent taunt.
To the master assassin. The world was changing. The grip of the ice grew tighter, the air thinner, the wind more relentless. The herds of bison and horse, the assassinal's favored prey, grew scarce. Hunger, the great motivator, the engine of all dynasties, began to grind. The Smilodon, a ruler of a failing kingdom, was pushed to the edge of its own philosophy. Patience is a luxury of the well-fed. Desperation demanded a new, terrible calculus. And so, the assassin looked upon the fortress. It was a lone Smilodon, a master of its creed, now forced to betray it. It stalked the herd of mammoths, a shadow flitting between monolithic, moving legs. The very act was a sacrilege. The titans moved with an indifferent, geological calm. The assassin was a whisper of malice at the foot of a god. But desperation breeds focus. The Smilodon did not see the herd. It saw only a gap. From the protective circle of the matriarchs. This was the gamble. Not an attack on the fortress wall, but a desperate strike at a perceived crack. The stalk was a masterpiece of suicidal courage. Every step was a vibration that threatened to betray it. The ground shook. The air was thick with the musk of the titans. The Smilodon's heart, the engine of the ambush, hammered against its ribs. It moved into the titan's shadow, a space where the sun had not touched the snow. Then, the explosion. With a roar that was more agony than aggression, the assassin committed. It burst from its cover, a blur of muscle and saber, and launched itself not at the throat, an impossible target, but at the colossal flank. It was the leap of an insurgent scaling a castle wall. The impact was a shock to both.
The Smilodon's claws, designed to hold bison, sank into the thick, hairy hide.
It clung on, a thing of terrible, desperate purpose. The mammoth bellowed, a sound of pure, astonished outrage. It was the sound of a mountain being bitten. This was the cliff axe of the Assassin's Creed. This was the ultimate test. The Smilodon, hanging from the side of the living fortress.
Tried to find purchase, to use its immense grappling strength.
It fought to pull itself up, to deplore the daggers, to find any vulnerability. But there was none. The mammoth did not fight back. It merely reacted. With a violent, earth-shaking shudder, the Titan twisted. The Smilodon was not thrown. It was expelled. It was flung through the air with the casual, immense force of a natural disaster.
Crashing into the frozen earth.
It rose, stunned, its entire body a symphony of pain. But the physical hurt was nothing. The true wound was to its philosophy. The assassin had made its ultimate gamble. It had struck the walking mountain. And the mountain had not even noticed the blade. It simply shrugged, and the assassin was broken. The Mammoth dynasty, without a single act of aggression,
had proven the Smilodon's sacred weapons to be useless.
The shadow had passed. The assassin did not die in that moment, but its dynasty did. The broken hunter, limping away from the indifferent, retreating herd, was a symbol of a broken creed.
The Saber-toothed's gamble had failed. And in that failure was the judgment of an emerging world.
Its philosophy, so perfect for one kind of war, was now revealed as a fatal over-specialization.
The world was turning, and the rules of the kingdom were being rewritten.
The great ice that had forged these titans, demanding philosophies of scale and specialized violence,
began to recede. The kingdom of the mammoth, the unassailable fortress, was also fading. Its dominion dissolving with the permafrost it walked upon. And the Smilodon, the master artisan of the kill, was left stranded by the turning of the age. Its weapons were too specialized, its powerful grapple-built body too heavy. For the smaller, faster creatures of the new world. The assassin's daggers, those beautiful, terrible instruments of power,
became magnificent relics.
They were the crowns of a ruler whose throne had melted away from beneath it.
The age of brutal, specialized power was over. The assassin's shadow faded from the land, leaving only its ghost.
And so the chronicle of this ruler ends. We are left only with the silence
and the beautifully tragic weapons of a fallen dynasty.
When we look upon its saber-toothed skull, we are not witnessing a monster, but the profound echo of a specialized power that the world simply left behind.
The assassin is gone, its story a whisper in the land it once ruled.